Chapter 23. Transitions. It was months before our lives seemed to return to normal. Oran was completely devastated by Tuitude's death, and it was weeks before I could get him to return to work on the records. He would sit and stare blindly out the window. I think watching him affected me more than my own loss. He became a vegetable. Elchie, who had handled the deaths probably better than any of us, doted on him like a mother on her babe. Oran refused to eat and could not sleep. He only stared into the blackness of the night. Elchie tried everything to bring him out of his stupor. He would fix his favorite food, try singing and telling jokes to him. Nothing worked. I, who remained in a depressed state for days after the news, became aware of my friend's unusual vacant stare and his inability to communicate. What was even more frightening was his nonplussed reaction to my encouragement to work on the records. As if she had died, his will had left him too. I understood that very well, for I had experienced it myself. The only difference was that I was able to climb up out of the empty depths of my sorrow and realize that I must continue on with my life. I thought about Miram and what she had said to me that night. I knew that she was right. What we were doing was important. The records would someday enlighten civilizations who could learn from our mistakes. The information that we were recording might someday amaze the discoverers. Perhaps all we took for granted for knowledge would someday not exist, if the world was to be upturned in turmoil and disaster as predicted. When I thought of these things, it lit a fire to spurn me out of self-doubting existence. With these same thoughts, I tried to bring Oran out of his debilitating state of mind. It was like talking to a wall. He could not or would not hear a word I said. I could not pierce this wall that he had set up. His physical condition was deteriorated. He became thin and emaciated from not eating. He no longer groomed himself and had grown a beard, appearing unkempt and slovenly. He wouldn't permit Elchie or myself to touch him. We were at the end of our rope. After months of this and anticipating him to expire from his mental and physical state, it was strange for us to come into his room and find that he was gone. We were frantic. We both assumed the worst. We proceeded to look for him in a place that he might choose to die. My first thought was the Temple of Sacrifice. When we were children, we would often visit our mother and lie on the Temple of Eternity, talking of how it would be when we died and left our body behind. When I reached the temple, there were no sign of him. Sigurd informed us that he had come there and indeed had laid on the table to die. But he left the chamber for a moment, and when he returned, Oran was no longer there. Where could he be? I thought of every place that he and Tuitude had found special, and went there only to find that he was not there. Both Elchie and I were out of our minds with worry. Elchie suggested that he may have gone to the Hall of Records. After the many times that I had talked to him about the records in the past few months, and his lack of interest, I sincerely doubted if he would go there. But I had run out of ideas, and agreed to go with Elchie to see if he'd gone there. When we arrived, there were only a few of the assistants working. I looked at Elchie, feeling that we had reached another dead end. He insisted that we look at Oran's workplace. When we rounded the corner to view Oran's cubicle, we were surprised to see Oran working as if the past few months had never occurred. Both Elchie and I caught our breath at the sight of him. Without interrupting what he was doing, he casually said, "Don't you have work to do?" We knew that he was right. He didn't mention the amazing transformation in him until weeks later. Then he told us what had happened. The day that he went to the Table of Eternity, he did indeed go there to die. He felt as if he was already dead, and that this was the finality of his moments on earth. When he laid his head back on the table and closed his eyes, he saw the famed tunnel that led to the Light of One. As he felt himself walking closer and closer to the light, Tuitude appeared to him. She was crying. She told him of how it pained her to see him in such condition for so long. She had tried to reach him before, but he had shut himself off from everything. She then told him how it hurt her to know that he had stopped working on the project because of her. She reminded him of its importance and told him to remember the words that I had said. She also told him that it wasn't time for him to go, and he must fulfill his mission that he had designed. Seeing her cry filled him with sorrow. He promised her that he would go back and complete his mission. She assured him that she would be with him always, and he only had to believe that she was there, and she would be. After his mission was complete, she told him they would rejoin each other in heavenly bliss. As he walked back through the tunnel of light, he could see her dressed in all white, her hair blowing behind her. She was like an angel. She smiled and waved goodbye. as he passed back into his body. He would never forget it. We hadn't received word from Sade since the annihilation of the Sadian ship. Helm's plan had not worked as he had anticipated. The people of Sade were ready for battle with the Atlanteans, if that was what the Atlanteans wanted. Sadians mourned the loss of their ruler, but were quick to promote his son, Prince Agamemnon, to the throne. Because of the distance separating the two countries and the lack of the technical expertise by the Atlanteans, Prince Agamemnon chose not to wreak havoc upon the Atlanteans. He would, however, not be overtaken upon his own soil. Helm, distracted for the moment from the eastern countries, was concentrating on his conquest to the south. In the countries of Og and Oz, Helm was constructing more and more connectors for the beam of the fire crystal. This enabled him to attack the foreign forces directly, and none could surpass his force. Fear was the greatest weapon. These countries would not compete militarily with ATLATIA. Once they had witnessed the powers of the lasers, their people fled into the mountains, seeking refuge with their gods. Another sight that was frightening to these people were the things. They had never witnessed half man, half beast, and their ferocity due to the mind control program was horrifying. Helm was enlarging his empire bit by bit. He still searched for greater power, and due to the slow progress with the connectors for the fire crystal, he decided to use more of their new powers for his mighty weapon. That weapon was powered by nuclear energy. His scientists had created another frightening weapon, a nuclear bomb. To test the magnitude of its power, Helm decided to use it against one of the adversaries on the islands to the south. They were actually not adversaries. They were a simple country with no military to oppose Helm. They were a peaceful nation, and most of the inhabitants had never even heard of ATLATIA. It was a sunny day in the country of Azor. People were going about their business as usual when out of the sky appeared one of the great Atlantean airships. Their country had been visited but once before by such a ship, and people ran out of their houses to view it. Within moments of the time the ship was spotted by the inhabitants. The ship released what appeared to be a bundle of something. The people rushed in its direction, thinking they were receiving goods from the ship. Before they reached it, the silver package exploded into a giant gray mushroom cloud. The beautiful island was turned into chaos. What had just stood as a beautiful paradise turned into ashes. Bodies lay charred and mutilated on the ground. It was horrifying. The island really meant nothing to Helm. It was a testing ground, but now he knew what he could use another weapon in his quest to take over the world. Helm's power grew and grew. It was becoming more and more difficult for those of the One to meet within Pisidia. Although they weren't his first order of business, Helm kept a close watch on them. He felt threatened at the existence of the temples, and although he never closed them, he kept a close eye on them. It appeared to be safer in ATLATIA for those of the One than traveling to another country. Travel was closely monitored, and to some countries was actually prohibited. One of those countries was Sade. Therefore, it was difficult for word to come in and out of the country. Trade had been severed between the two countries, which had made it almost impossible to receive word from those of the One who remained in Sade. Despite our inability to communicate with those in Sade, we continued our recordings. It was more and more disheartening to record the current events. Helm and his associates basked in their glory. They were more decadent than ever. However, it wasn't long when this karma kept up to him. About 10 years after his nuclear test, he was afflicted with syphilis and died. To ATLATIA, this wasn't good news. To follow in his footsteps was his son, Pundo. Pundo had been anxious for years to take over rule of ATLATIA. He, unlike his father, had no scientific aspirations. Although Helm had tried to have him educated in the sciences, Pundo was not interested. He was more interested in women and experimenting with mind-altering potions. Helm had decreed before he died that his son follow in his footsteps. One thing that Pundo had in common with his father was his quest for his power. In fact, he was more frightening than Helm in the respect that he would stop at nothing to achieve his ultimate goal, a global reign. Helm had hardly been dead a day when Pundo began instituting his decrees, the first of which was the execution of all things. He had felt that it was degrading for his country to have these deformed beings walking about representing the country. He felt that there were enough Lemurians and others who could serve his same purpose. These executions were easily implemented. Since they were all under the control of the government anyway, the devices planted within their brains were tuned to kill them instantly. When Orin heard the new decree, he feared for my safety. He was afraid that someone would find out about my true identity, and I would be caught and executed. He even tried to convince me to hide in the tunnels with the few Lemurians who still remained there. I would not. It wasn't long before his first decree that he dictated another. He wanted the temples closed and all of the One to be taken prisoner. He felt that those of the One were threats to his philosophy. He wanted ATLATIA to be a supreme race, and within that philosophy there was no room for one God. He wanted the people to worship him. At the first news of the decree, those of us of the One who remained at ATLATIA hid as best we could. Off the tunnels that ran beneath the temples were safe houses where Lemurians had lived in refuge. These safe houses were accessed only by the secret entrances, and was close to impossible to find if you had not known of its existence. On the day of the decree, Oren and I were working in the Hall of Records. Elchi arrived with the news. Pundo had decreed that all temples be closed and that all of the Hall of One be captured and taken to the city prison. How long before they get there? Oren asked. I don't know, soon. I grabbed Oren's arm. Come, we must take what we have and go to the safe houses within the tunnels. We shall be safe there until we can decide what to do. Oren gathered many of the discs that contained the valued information as time. I need more time. We have no time. We must leave now, I told him. Elchi helped him put the disc inside the gold box. Please, Elchi, gather those scrolls that are on the table. We must take them with us. Elchi did as he was asked. I also gathered any disc or scroll that I thought had not been recorded. We grabbed what we could and then fled to the temple. Quickly we notified all that remained in the temple, and the group of us proceeded to the safe house. As we closed the door to the safe house, we could hear the enforcers entering the temple above. We lay there silent, not daring to make a sound for fear of discovery. After hours of hearing the enforcers tramp by the door, it finally became silent. For a moment we sat praying that the danger had passed. Sigun told us that the other temples were safe from Pundo for now, unless he decided to use force to enter them. Each temple's door was safely secured with a lock, which would keep out Pundo and his enforcers. Oren was disheartened by the fact that the records had not been totally finished. We still had to copy the discs we did have and get them to Og and Sade, none of which seemed to be within our reach at this moment. We had no plan of escape or anything. We had very little food and water left from Lemurians who had lived there. We had to do something soon or we would all perish from hunger. We decided the first thing we'd do was to get food. The only place we could easily accessible, providing that we didn't get caught, was Oren's house. We could get food from his garden. The only time that would be safe would be at night. That night, Oren, Elchi, and I stole out of the temple to get some food. The temple was guarded, and we had to be careful to sneak by them. We stealthily walked into the shadows towards Oren's house. Inside, there were lights on. We could hear voices. Inside, a group of enforcers enjoyed themselves lying on the cushions and eating the fruit on the table. Apparently, they were waiting our return. I stood guard while Elchi and Oren went into the garden. I would give them a warning call, a bird call, if there was a danger. The enforcers had brought their own liquor for refreshment and were getting increasingly more inebriated. It was thanks to this state that they were in that they never heard Elchi as he dropped a bag of fruit on the patio. The sound would surely have been heard had they been in better form. On the way back to the temple, Oren insisted that we pass by the Hall of Records. He wanted to see if we could take the computer and perhaps connect it inside the temple so we could continue work. I thought he was crazy. Outside stood two rather large enforcers. The doors were bolted shut. I could see no way which we could retrieve the computer. Let us hit them over the head with these bags of fruit and force open the door, he said. How can we be sure that there aren't two more around the corner? We'll deal with them if they come up, Oren said flatly. I think we can do it. Elchi, you stay here. If you see another, hit him. I didn't feel good about this. The odds were definitely not in our favor. Please, Oren. We can't find another way to copy these desks. He was determined. No. If we don't get in tonight, we may not get another chance. Perhaps he'll trash the place or remove the computers and remaining discs and scrolls. I could see his point. Against my better judgment, I agreed to do it. We split up. We went to the right and I to the left. Elchi was to distract them so they would not notice our approach. At the right moment, we both bopped them and with their laser guns broke the bolt off the door. We quickly dismantled the computer. It was quite heavy, so I was left to the job of carrying it. Just as we were about to leave, we heard sounds of other enforcers approaching. Quick, get back to the temple. I shall divert their attention. Quickly. Oren pushed me off towards the temple. In a moment, Elchi was by my side. Oren had given me no time to protest. I didn't know how he was going to divert their attention and return behind us unnoticed. I was scared. Oren took the laser that he had taken from one of the guards and ignited a fire on the other side of the Hall of Records. He figured that would be enough for them to be distracted. I saw the fire and knew that what he had started. I just hoped that we got to the area quickly. Oren ran around the building, and just as we were about to turn towards the park, separating him from us, an enforcer popped out of nowhere. Drop it, the enforcer ordered him. Oren stopped dead in his tracks and dropped the laser.